Good morning friends. In our previous video we discussed all the aspects related to the process of TDS deduction from payment of salary along with a practical derivation on the same. Today I will discuss on one of the very important sections of TDS along with all the practical permutations and combinations possible related to it. This is the only section of TDS which not only have two different rates of TDS based on the legal status of the payee but also two different limits. Yes, you guessed it right. It's section 194C, TDS on payment to contractors. First, let's have a look at what the section 194C says. Subsection 1 of section 194C states that any person responsible for paying any sum to any resident referred to as contractor for this section for carrying out any work including supply of labor in pursuance of a contract between the contractor and a specified person shall at the time of credit of such sum to the account of the contractor or at the time of payment thereof in cash or by issue of a cheque or draft or any other mode whichever is earlier, deduct an amount equal to 1% where the payment is being made or credit is being given to an individual or a Hindu undivided family, and 2% where the payment is being made or credit is being given to a person other than an individual or a Hindu undivided family of such sum of income tax on income comprised therein. Before moving further onto the topic, let me explain some key takeaways from this subsection of section 194C. At the time of credit of such sum to the account of contractor, I repeat, at the time of credit of such sum to the account of contractor implies that once the invoice is entered in the books of accounts and the contractor is credited, TDS have to be deducted irrespective of whether the payment is made or not. It's then mentioned or at the time of payment whichever is earlier. I repeat, it's then mentioned or at the time of payment whichever is earlier, which implies that even if advance payment is made to the contractor, irrespective of whether the invoice is given or not, TDS have to be deducted on each such advance payment if the amount shall cross the specified threshold limit on final payment. It's also evident from this subsection that yes, there are two rates of TDS specified in section 194C. 1% of the amount have to be deducted if the payee is an individual or holds the legal status of HUF, that is Hindu undivided family, and 2% of the amount in any other case, that is company, LLP, firm, society or any other entity except individual and HUF. Now let's analyze the threshold limit prescribed by section 194C for TDS deduction. Subsection 5 of 194C talks about the threshold limit. It says that no deduction shall be made from the amount of any sum credited or paid or likely to be credited or paid to the account of the contractor if such sum does not exceed 30,000 rupees. I repeat, if such sum does not exceed 30,000 rupees. Provided that where the aggregate of the amounts of such sums credited or paid or likely to be credited or paid during the financial year exceeds 1 lakh rupees, the person responsible for paying such sum to the contractor shall be liable to deduct income tax under this section. So it is evident from the subsection 5 of 194C that there are two limits specified under the Act for deducting TDS from payment to contractors. First, rupees 30,000 for single invoice and then rupees 1 lakh in aggregate in a year. Now let me explain the limits and deduction thereon through the practical derivation of the same with all possible permutations and combinations for developing more clarity on the topic. Suppose ABC Trust have engaged contractor Mr. XYZ for the repairing work of the building. Now let's see case 1. The total contract amount is rupees 5 lakhs. So whenever any payment is made to Mr. XYZ, including payment in advance for the contract work, TDS should be deducted at the rate of 1% or 2% by the ABC Trust depending on the legal status of Mr. XYZ. This is because ABC Trust is aware of the fact that the aggregate payment in a year to Mr. XYZ shall increase the annual threshold limit of rupees 1 lakh because the contract amount is of rupees 5 lakhs. Remember, if you are thinking you will deduct TDS only from the final payment and not on advances, you are wrong. You shall be held liable for interest on late deduction of TDS in such cases. Also remember, even if such bill is below rupees 30,000, even if each bill is below rupees 30,000, then also TDS shall be applicable because the annual payment to the contractor shall exceed the threshold limit of annual limit which is prescribed in the provisions of this section. Now let's see case 2. In the same example, suppose the total contract value would have been rupees 90,000. Then you might think that no TDS shall be deducted as it does not cross the threshold limit annually of rupees 1 lakh, but this is not true in all cases. Even if the contract value does not exceed rupees 1 lakh, even if it is rupees 90,000, TDS shall still have to be deducted if the contractor submits a single invoice for the same, as it shall exceed the threshold limit of rupees 30,000 prescribed for each invoice. I repeat, even if the total contract value is rupees 90,000 which is below rupees 1 lakh, TDS shall still have to be deducted if the contractor submits a single invoice for the entire amount, as it shall exceed the threshold limit of rupees 30,000 prescribed for each invoice. Now let's see case 3. However, if suppose the contractor provides one bill of rupees 40,000 and two bills each of rupees 25,000, then TDS will be deducted only on one bill of rupees 40,000 because it crosses the threshold limit specified for single invoice. But on the other bills, no TDS shall be deducted as neither they crossed the threshold limit meant for single invoice, nor the total payment to the contractor shall exceed the annual threshold limit of rupees 1 lakh because the contract value is of rupees 90,000. Similarly, if two bill exceeds rupees 30,000 and one bill is below the limit, altogether making it a total of rupees 90,000, then also TDS shall be deducted from the payment of only two bills but not the third bill because that does not cross the threshold limit of rupees 30,000 prescribed for single invoice. Now let's discuss case 4. You must be thinking that then what are those cases where TDS shall not be deducted under section 194C? In section 194C, TDS shall not be deducted only in two cases. If there are three bills of rupees 30,000 each or more than three bills each below rupees 30,000, though they together make it a total of rupees 90,000, as in both the cases neither the annual threshold limit nor that of a single invoice is being exceeded. I repeat, taking the contract value to rupees 90,000, if there are three bills of rupees 30,000 each or more than three bills each below rupees 30,000, making it a total of rupees 90,000, the TDS shall not be deducted, as in both the cases neither the annual threshold limit nor that of a single invoice is being exceeded. I hope these examples were useful for understanding the threshold limit for deduction of TDS. So till now, what we discussed was the rate of TDS under section 194C and the threshold limit prescribed for TDS deduction. Now we shall move a step further and discuss the amount on which such rates of TDS shall be applied for deduction. Subsection 3 of section 194C says that where any sum is paid or credited for carrying out any work mentioned in the subclause E of clause 4 of the explanation, tax shall be deducted at source on the invoice value excluding the value of material if such value is mentioned separately in the invoice, or on the whole of the invoice value if the value of the material is not mentioned separately in the invoice. So let's discuss the implications and key takeaways from the above subsection. Usually in a contract, there are two components, material and labor. As per the above provisions, it is evident that the TDS shall be deducted on the amount excluding the value of material, thus implying TDS shall be deducted only on the labor portion of the invoice. I repeat, usually in a contract, there are two components, material and labor. As per the above provisions, it is evident that the TDS shall be deducted on the amount excluding the value of material, thus implying TDS shall be deducted only on the amount of labor mentioned in the invoice. The subsection is also very clear on the fact that charges for materials and labor should be separately mentioned in the invoice, else the TDS shall be deducted on the whole invoice amount including the value of materials. So let's understand this point better through practical examples with all possible permutations and combinations. Taking the same example forward as in case 1 above, where the total contract value was rupees 5 lakh and TDS was asked to be deducted since it was evident that the total amount shall exceed the annual threshold limit of rupees 1 lakh. But in the same case, if the value of material and labor has been provided separately, although on the same invoice, and the value of labor is below rupees 1 lakh, no TDS is required to be deducted. So this is the twist. In the same case, taking the contract value of rupees 5 lakh, if the value of material and labor has been provided separately, although in the same invoice, and the value of the labor is below rupees 1 lakh, no TDS is required to be deducted. Taking the same example as was discussed in case 2 above, where the contract value was rupees 90,000, you must remember TDS was asked to be deducted on the whole amount if there was a single bill or only on that particular bill where the amount of bill was exceeding rupees 30,000. So now in this case also there is a twist. Now suppose there was a single invoice for rupees 90,000 and the material cost was rupees 70,000 and labor portion is merely rupees 20,000. Then no TDS have to be deducted, though the threshold limit of rupees 30,000 for a single invoice has been exceeded. But if you just reverse the figures for material and labor, and TDS will be applicable on rupees 70,000 but not on rupees 20,000, as the breakup of labor and material is mentioned on the invoice. I would like to provide you with one very important note here. All the amounts which we have discussed above on which TDS was either required or not required to be deducted was exclusive of GST which is levied on the invoices. I repeat, all the amounts which we have discussed above on which TDS was either required or not required to be deducted was exclusive of GST which is levied on the invoices. So for applicability of TDS, one needs to check the basic amount mentioned in the invoice which is exclusive of GST. So let's summarize our discussion on deduction of TDS under section 194C by revisiting key points you need to remember. First, TDS have to be deducted on the labor portion and not on the value of material if separately mentioned on the invoice. Next, the legal status of the payee needs to be checked before deciding on the rate at which the TDS has to be deducted under this section. Next, both the threshold limits need to be checked for single invoice and in aggregate of all the invoices. Coming to the next point, remember TDS is not applicable on GST. And last but very important of all, don't forget to take the PAN of the contractor, as it will be required at the time of filing of TDS return. So I hope deduction of TDS under section 194C shall look a bit easier now. For any queries, feel free to contact us or comment below. Thank you.